I was wondering how it's possible to create a balance between educating women in Africa as to their rights and not imposing too much a sort of Western mindset.
So I missed it. I'm not imposing what?
Too much of a Western mindset and a Western mentality in terms of women's rights here in North America and Europe. That's basically how to maintain a sort of African culture while addressing the AIDS pandemic.
Okay, thank you. The whole issue of the global connection. For me, I'm challenged as I listen to you to say, to what extent do we really understand the whole issue of the Eastern Europe and what connections are there? I wouldn't like to say none, or there is any. I wouldn't like to say that, because it's when you're so involved with your own experience and suffering, it's very difficult to understand what is going on out there. You understand? It's only things like, for example, the treatment action campaign that have connected all of us, globally, to say there's a problem in Africa, and that you can't make people pay for this kind of service for treatment. For me, I look at those kind of movements as what has connected us, but I really don't think there has been like a connection per se of them and us to say, so how are you doing? Yeah, this is what. No, I think it's unfortunate, yeah. But yeah, I think I can comfortably say that. But then also just to remind you that don't forget about some other global movements like the Treatment Action Campaign, which has really helped a lot. What can be done in the Caribbean? I don't know what sort of statistics you have in the Caribbean with regards to HIV prevalence, but one of the problems that we had at the beginning is governance. In fact, all this is about governance problems, because our governments refused to recognize this as an issue until it blew out of proportion and they couldn't even deal with it. Apart from that, I don't know to what extent the Caribbean countries have been engaged with the whole issue of SAPs and IMF and World Bank agreements, trade agreements. That also for us, by the time, first of all, there was a denial of the existence of this pandemic. It was a Northern American thing. It's about gay people in North America. We Africans are not gay. And then it was about commercial sex workers. It's about them and not us. Then by the time it became obvious that it's an explosion, we had already been engaged, for example, in SAPs, and where there was a reduction in health spending, and the whole system had already crumbled. The health system had crumbled, and by the time HIV came, it couldn't deal with it because of the kind of agreements that we had with IMF and whatever. So it's a governance problem. So to what extent is your government embracing this and ensuring that its health budget is up-notch? That also, over and above, is it just tourism? Have you really understood?
No, what I'm saying...
No, I'm just asking to say, no, I don't know. I'm just saying, also understand it. That is it just about tourism or there's something more? Because for us, it was immigrants. Hey, commercial sex workers. By the time we realized it's really about everyday living and over and above the whole issue of lack of effective response by government, it was too late. So all I'm trying to say is that I would engage you to really understand the problem very well, but also challenge your own governments in their responses. Oh yeah, the last one. Balance between rights and reality. I wasn't sure when you were saying to say educating African women, who is doing the education? Because for me, rights are an inherent aspect. I've always argued about rights, about what we all are as human beings, whether we are Africans or non-Africans. For me, the debate shifts in terms of recognition of those rights. So in the context of Africa, I believe that one of the critical considerations is the recognition of rights of women, particularly coming from the whole issue of our culture. you know, a culture which does not, in so many places, does not really have a lot of respect for women as equals. It has respect for women as child bearers, as mothers, as whatever, but not to say as individuals with autonomous space. So that becomes a problem. So of course people engage to say you're bringing things from the north. But then when you stand up and say all of you have no political rights, there shall be one party, they all go marching. We have rights to have multiple parties. But when you say women have rights, no, you're getting this from the West. You know, so it's really a question of double standards as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Do you have one question then? We'll just take one question now. Or, well, okay. Seodi's actually, you really say a lot very quickly, so maybe we can take one more round of questions. You do. You're wonderful. So we'll take one more set of three, and then we'll break up.
I actually have a comment, and I want to thank you very much for drawing our attention in a very vivid way to the situation, the lived realities of women in Southern Africa. When somebody asked you what we can do, and I'd like to speak from the perspective of being here in Canada, particularly drawing attention, and some of you may know this, to the kind of foreign policy our current national government has, and the major shift in funding in foreign aid from Africa and more aligning with the US. And in fact, most of our aid is now going to Afghanistan and Haiti, and more, in spite of what the government says, a lot of our aid has been withdrawn, and I think people need to know about that and really pressure our government.
Yes.
Hi. Just want to say that was a wonderful lecture. Thank you. I was a young boy when I emigrated from South Africa, and apartheid had just ended when I emigrated, and I was very ignorant at the time. I was very isolated, insulated as to what was going on in terms of AIDS, and I just wanted to know, as a Malawian, as somebody who comes from a country that borders South Africa, as a country that is, I suppose, more westernized than any other country in Africa. How do the bordering countries interpret the South African government's denial of the spread of AIDS, I suppose, as an influence or as an excuse not to take action in their own countries? Because Thabo Mbeki is known very well around the world to be a denier of the way that AIDS is spread. So, thank you.
One more.
Hello, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Seneca. I'm from Zambia, and I just wanted to appreciate and to just give honor to our representative from Southern Africa. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whatever she's spoken about is most the facts and the truth. And I just had some few things that I wanted to ask. And most of you who have toured Africa, you've been to South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, you know the realities. So the question I have for our governments, as you said, and also for the traditional chiefs, what is our country, the Southern African countries, doing in terms of protecting the culture, sensitization, or let me say, how should I put it? The sensitization of the culture, because we have the cleansing, which is real, and we have things that to deal with the women that they have no right in the marriage to speak, and also raising of the children, it's more like for a woman. And how is the government going to deal with this to change the minds or to sensitize the culture to know that we have to fight this problem to overcome the HIV and AIDS, because mostly you find that the girls, they drop out just because of the cultural influences. So maybe if something can be done to our, to our chiefs, as well as to the government, how the chiefs and the government can work together to make sure that our local people, mostly it's in the villages, that's where there's a problem which is bigger. And people are not very much educated about it, and they're not sensitized, and because of our rituals, it is very hard to overcome it because we are born with it, and it's in us, and it's in the blood. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. The first point, I think, was a comment, and I think it just also validates my point about the whole issue about global citizenship. Because, for example, if you have a policy of the government which is now focusing on Afghanistan and Haiti, and then ignoring a critical issue like HIV/AIDS, something needs to change. You need to work at the government through whatever constituencies that you may engage in to show that that policy is wrong, and there's need for a paradigm shift. It's difficult for me to do that, but it's within your reach. And the examples I gave about the prevention of domestic violence and the constitutional review process, just to show that there's nothing special about my organization in terms of its placement, but we changed. A very, very resistant government. We managed to come up with a law, and I've actually said to various cabinet ministers that the constitution will change, just by mere persuasion, and I believe Canadians are placed to do that, so that you're in solidarity with us. That's my argument, and supporting your point. The whole issue about Mbeki, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. Because in so many aspects, when he first said it, everybody was up in arms to say, because what he was saying that a syndrome cannot cause a disease. I think that was his argument. There are a lot of factors to these issues of poverty and, all these things that we're talking about are attached. He should have separated clearly. Of course, there's also the issue of his denial. He didn't want to spend money, Mbeki. He didn't want to spend money on drugs, on the whole issue of HIV, particularly on drugs. So that's why he kept having mixed messages. But in one strand, his message has been vindicated in that his argument about the link between poverty and HIV/AIDS is now very clear. Then it sounded ridiculous. Okay, but now that link is clear. However, he has never gone out of his way and corrected to say, I meant this in respect of denial. He has never, but there's a small shift by his government because of the courts, because the judiciary in South Africa is very, very active. So it has ordered the government to be spending money on mother-to-child transmission, for example. It was in selected areas. They said they have to find the resources and spend on everybody, So because it is still a democratic country up to now, they're able to follow what that has said. Despite what the leadership is all about, there's also a leadership that has emerged from the judiciary. So we, in the other Southern African countries, are having to learn from the South Africa experience, whereby the president himself is not totally convinced, but the systems around him are pushing him to be convinced. So it's not so like Thabo Mbeki says and everybody is like that. It's more of when Thabo Mbeki said it, what happened? One, there are elements of truth in what he said. Two, despite the fact that he has never clarified his position, he's been forced to spend by his own structures and system, and that is democracy. And we in the other Southern African countries haven't reached that level. Our judiciary has not reached that level where it is forcing our governments to spend. And it's a lesson that we can all learn from. And of course, at least he was able to keep talking about it. Other presidents, they've got no time. They want to talk about, who wants to take me out of power and who doesn't, and never about HIV. So at least Mbeki said something negative. The others they want to pretend that it's not there, The whole issue about my colleague from Zambia said, I mean, I totally agree about working with chiefs. Chiefs are very powerful. If you saw them, at least the chiefs in my country, they'll be in tattered clothes. You wouldn't even think they have anything to say. But let them just raise their hand and say, sit down. Everybody sits, including me. They are very powerful, and therefore, and they're custodians of our culture. And engaging with chiefs by the government itself as a leader is one of the most effective strategies. You know, but the government has not used chiefs as such. It has used chiefs for political reasons, to make sure people vote in a different way, but never about behavioral change, you know, in the whole society, never. And they're an important mechanism for change, as far as I'm concerned. And the same thing with the whole issue of marriage. Of course, it's a whole issue about change of policy, but it's also the leadership, really engaging people, but in terms of how they relate to each other in marriage. But the leadership wants to pretend everything is fine in marriages. You know, they'd rather go to funerals left, right, and center without mentioning anything and come back. You know, so for me, it's also this whole HIV/AIDS fight. It's also about political leadership, which should target at the very core of the virus. Is it marriage? Is it the chiefs? Is it whatever? So that's my response to that. Yes.
Thank you very, very much. Now.